The stranger collapsed on her doorstep during the worst storm Thornbury had seen in 30 years, and Imogen Hartfield dragged him inside, not because she was kind, but because if anyone discovered a dying man on her property, the magistrate would use it as an excuse to seize what little remained of her father's estate. She had lost everything else already: the house, the land, the horses, all sold to pay debts her father's business partner had manufactured after the old man's death. The cottage she now occupied had been the gamekeeper's lodge, too insignificant for creditors to bother with, tucked so far into the woods that even the debt collectors forgot it existed. She had 3 rooms, a leaking roof, and a vegetable garden that barely kept her fed through winter. She would not lose this too. The man was soaked through, his fine coat torn and muddied beyond recognition. Blood seeped from a wound on his temple, though she could see no other injuries. His face was unnaturally pale, his breathing so shallow she had to press her ear to his chest to confirm he still lived. She stripped away his wet clothing with the efficiency of someone who had once managed a household of 20 servants, wrapped him in the only spare blanket she owned, and built up the fire until the cottage was stifling. For 3 days, he did not wake. She spooned broth between his lips, changed the bandage on his head, and kept the fire burning. She did not pray. God had not listened when her father died, had not intervened when Jonathan Crow, her father's partner, her former fiancé, had forged documents and stolen everything. She would not waste breath on prayer now. On the 4th morning, she found the stranger's eyes open, watching her from the narrow bed she had given him while she slept on the floor. "You should not have brought me inside," he said. His voice was rough from disuse, but the accent was cultured, the diction precise. "It was not safe." "Safe for whom?" Imogen set down the bowl of porridge she had been preparing. "You were dying. I could hardly leave you on the step. You do not understand what I am. You are a man who was injured in a storm. That is all I need to understand." She crossed the small room and held out the bowl. "Eat. You have been unconscious for days." He took the bowl but did not eat, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His eyes were an unusual shade of amber, almost golden in the firelight. "What is your name?" "Imogen Hartfield. This is my cottage. You are on what remains of the Hartfield estate, though that amounts to very little now." She sat in the room's only chair, keeping a careful distance. "And you are?" "Lucian Vane." He set the bowl aside, untouched. "I knew your father. We had business dealings some years ago." The name meant nothing to her, though her father had dealt with dozens of merchants and investors before his death. "Then you know he is gone. And you know his partner stole everything that was not entailed away." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and despised it. "If you came seeking investment opportunities, Mr. Vane, you have wasted your time." "I came seeking Jonathan Crow." His expression hardened, the golden eyes turning cold. "I heard he had taken residence in the manor house. I intended to call upon him." "Then you are a fool. Crow does not receive visitors unless they come bearing money or influence. He certainly would not receive someone who arrives in the middle of a storm, half dead." She stood, retrieving the bowl he had refused. "You may stay until you are well enough to travel. After that, I suggest you forget whatever business you had with Crow and leave Thornbury. Men who cross him do not prosper." "And women?" His gaze followed her across the room. "What happens to women who cross Jonathan Crow?" "They lose everything." She turned her back to him, focusing on the fire. "They learn to survive on very little. They discover that pride is a luxury they can no longer afford." She heard him rise from the bed, heard the soft fall of his footsteps on the wooden floor. When she turned, he was standing closer than she had expected, still wrapped in her blanket, his face grave. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "That creates a debt. I will repay it." "I do not want your money, Mr. Vane." "I did not offer money." He held her gaze, and for a moment, she felt as though he could see straight through her, past the careful composure she maintained, past the anger she kept locked away. down to the raw wound of her humiliation. I offered a debt. There is a difference. Before she could respond, he swayed, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the wall. She caught his arm, feeling how cold his skin was despite the fire's heat, and guided him back to the bed. Rest, she said firmly. Whatever debt you imagine you owe can wait until you are well. He did not argue, but as she turned to leave, his hand closed around her wrist. His grip was gentle but unyielding. Jonathan Crow destroyed your life. I can help you destroy his, but you must trust me. I do not trust anyone, Mr. Vane. That is how I have survived this long. Then do not trust me. He released her wrist, his expression unreadable. Simply allow me to stay. Watch what I do. Judge for yourself whether I am worthy of your trust. She should have refused. She should have sent him away the moment he was strong enough to walk. Instead, she found herself nodding, a small, curt gesture that committed her to nothing and everything at once. Over the following week, Lucian Vane proved himself unlike any man she had ever known. He did not eat the food she prepared, claiming his stomach was still unsettled from the injury. He did not sleep at night, but sat by the fire reading books he had somehow acquired from the village. He moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, and when he looked at her, she felt the weight of centuries in his gaze, though he appeared no older than 35. He also began to ask questions, careful, probing questions about her father's death, about the documents Crow had presented to the magistrate, about the witnesses who had testified to debts that had never existed. "Why do you care?" she asked one evening, watching him from across the fire. "My father's ruin is hardly unique. Men are swindled every day." "Your father was not swindled. He was murdered." Lucian set aside the ledger he had been studying, one of the few documents she had managed to save from the estate. "These signatures are forgeries, competent forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Your father never borrowed the sums Crow claims. The debts are fabrications." "I know that." Imogen's hands clenched in her lap. "Everyone knows that. But Crow has the magistrate in his pocket, and the witnesses he bought swear otherwise. There is no proof, no way to challenge him without money for solicitors and barristers. I am alone, Mr. Vane. A woman alone has no power in the courts." "You are not alone." He rose from his chair and crossed to where she sat, kneeling so that their eyes were level. "I have resources, connections. I can bring pressure to bear that Crow cannot withstand. But I need your permission. I need you to trust me enough to let me act on your behalf." "Why?" The question burst from her, raw and desperate. "Why would you help me? You do not know me. You owe me nothing that justifies this kind of risk. I know you saved my life when you could have let me die. I know you gave me your only blanket and slept on the floor. I know you have survived 2 years of poverty and isolation without losing your dignity or your mind." His hand covered hers, warm despite the chill that seemed to emanate from him. "And I know what it is to be destroyed by someone you trusted. I will not stand by and watch it happen to another." She wanted to pull away. She wanted to refuse his help, to cling to the independence she had fought so hard to maintain. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of being cold, tired of being hungry, tired of watching Jonathan Crow parade through the village in her father's carriage while she dug turnips from frozen ground. "What would you do?" she asked. "First, I would visit Crow, alone. I would make him an offer he will find difficult to refuse. He will not receive you. I told you, he only meets with men of wealth and influence." Lucian smiled, and for the first time she saw something dangerous in his expression. "I am both wealthy and influential, Miss Hartfield, more than Crow can possibly imagine. He will receive me, and when he does, he will learn that there are consequences for theft." 2 days later, Lucian departed for the manor house in the evening, dressed in clothing that had arrived from London in a trunk she had not seen delivered. He wore black from head to toe, his coat perfectly tailored, his cravat tied with precision. He looked like a lord, like someone who belonged in drawing rooms and ballrooms, not in her tiny cottage with its leaking roof and smoking chimney. Do not wait up, he said at the door. This may take some time. What will you say to him? The truth, or at least, a version of it. He pulled on black gloves, his movements deliberate. I will tell him that I have evidence of his forgeries. I will tell him that I intend to present this evidence to the magistrate unless he makes restitution. And I will tell him that if he refuses, there will be consequences he cannot escape. He will not believe you. He will think you are bluffing. Then he will learn otherwise. Lucian turned back to her, his expression softening. Stay inside tonight, Imogen. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. You are frightening me. Good. You should be frightened. What I am about to do is not without risk. He hesitated, then reached out and touched her cheek, a gesture so gentle it made her throat tighten. But I will return. I promise you that. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the darkness beyond her door. She locked it as he had instructed, then sat by the fire and waited, her heart pounding with a fear she had learned not to speak aloud. He returned near dawn, his clothing unmarked, his expression grim. He said nothing as he entered, simply crossed to the fire and stood staring into the flames. What happened? Imogen demanded, rising from her chair. What did Crow say? He refused my offer. He called me a charlatan and a fraud. He threatened to have me arrested for trespassing. Lucian's voice was flat, emotionless. So I showed him what I am. I showed him the truth he has spent his entire life denying. And then I gave him a choice. What choice? Return everything he stole from your father's estate, publicly confess his crimes, and leave Thornbury forever. Or face me again, and this time, I will not be merciful. Imogen's throat closed. You threatened him. I did more than threaten him, Imogen. I made him understand that there are things in this world more terrifying than poverty or ruin. I made him understand that he is not safe, that he will never be safe again, as long as he remains in this house on stolen land. Lucian turned to face her, and his eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, that impossible golden color that no human eyes should possess. I showed him what I am, and now I must show you, because you deserve to know the truth before you decide whether to accept my help. What are you? The question came out as a whisper. I am old, Imogen, older than this village, older than the manor house, older than the church where your father is buried. I am what your priests call damned, what your folklore calls monster. I am a creature that should not exist, and yet I do. I have existed for centuries, and I will exist for centuries more. He took a step toward her, his movements fluid and predatory. I am vampire, and I have just used that nature to terrorize the man who destroyed your life. Her feet had known to move. She should have screamed, should have reached for the poker by the fire, should have done anything except stand frozen, staring at him with a mixture of horror and fascination. You are not afraid, he said, and there was wonder in his voice. I am terrified. Her voice shook, but she did not look away. But not of you. I am afraid of what this means. I am afraid that everything I believed about the world is a lie. I am afraid that if I accept your help, I will be bound to something I cannot understand. You will not be bound to me. I swear it. He closed the distance between them, his hands rising to frame her face. I offer you a choice, Imogen. Accept my help. Let me finish what I have started, and you will have your life back. Your home, your father's name, your future. Or refuse, and I will leave tonight. I will never trouble you again. But Crow will remain in that house, and you will remain here, and nothing will change. If I accept, what do you want in return? Nothing you are not willing to give. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, a touch so tender it made her ache. I do not trade in coercion, Imogen. I do not take what is not freely offered. If you allow me to help you, it is because you choose to, not because you owe me. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands against her skin, feeling the impossible truth of what he was settling over her like a shroud. A vampire, a creature of legend and nightmare, standing in her cottage, offering to save her. "Do it," she whispered. "Help me. I do not care what you are. I care only that Crow pays for what he has done." "Then he will pay." Lucian's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "I promise you that." The next morning, a messenger arrived at the cottage with a letter bearing the magistrate's seal. Imogen opened it with trembling hands, Lucian watching from the shadows where the sunlight could not reach him. The letter was brief. Jonathan Crow had confessed to forgery and fraud. He had signed documents returning all property and funds to the Hartfield estate. He had departed Thornbury in the night and would not return. The magistrate extended his apologies for the miscarriage of justice and invited Miss Hartfield to call upon him at her earliest convenience to finalize the legal arrangements. Imogen read the letter 3 times before she believed it. Then she looked up at Lucian, who stood motionless in the corner, his face carefully blank. "What did you do to him?" "I reminded him that there are worse things than poverty, worse things than ruin. I reminded him that immortality is not the blessing most humans imagine, and that eternity can be very long when spent in fear." Lucian's expression did not change. "He will not trouble you again. He will not trouble anyone again. I have seen to it." "You killed him?" It was not a question. "No. I do not kill unless there is no other choice. But I made him understand what it would mean to face me again. I made him understand that some debts cannot be escaped, no matter how far one runs." He moved toward her, stepping carefully to avoid the sunlight streaming through the window. "You are free, Imogen. The house is yours. The land is yours. Your father's name is cleared. You can return to the life you should have had." "And you?" She set the letter aside, her hands steady now. "What happens to you?" "I leave. I have stayed too long already. The village will begin to notice that I do not eat, that I am never seen in daylight, that I do not age. It is safer for both of us if I go." "What if I do not want you to go?" The words changed the room between them, dangerous and irrevocable. Lucian went very still, his golden eyes fixed on her face. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying." Imogen crossed the room to stand before him, close enough to feel the unnatural cold that radiated from his skin. "You saved me. You gave me back everything I had lost. You asked nothing in return, and now you intend to walk away as though none of it mattered." "It mattered. It matters more than you can possibly understand." His hands clenched at his sides, as though he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "But I am not human, Imogen. I cannot give you the life you deserve. I cannot give you children, cannot give you a normal marriage, cannot even give you the comfort of growing old together. I can only offer you darkness and secrecy and a love that will outlast your mortal years." "Then offer me that." She took his hands, feeling how cold they were, how still. "I do not want a normal life, Lucian. I have seen what normal life offers women like me. I want something more. I want something impossible. I want you. You will age. You will grow old while I remain as I am. You will die, and I will continue alone again for centuries. Then we will have whatever time we have." She lifted his hand to her cheek, holding it there. "Is that not better than nothing? Is that not worth the pain of losing me?" For a long moment he did not answer. Then, slowly, he pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that belied his careful control. His face pressed against her hair, his breath cold against her temple. "I cannot promise you forever," he whispered, "but I can promise you this. For as long as you live, you will be loved. You will be protected. You will never be alone again. That is all I ask." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers. Then, with infinite gentleness, he lowered his head and kissed her. His lips were cold, but the emotion behind the kiss was not. It was warmth and longing, and a fierce, protective tenderness that made her heart ache. When he finally released her, she was breathless, clinging to him for support. "There is something you must understand," he said quietly. "If you choose this, if you choose me, there will be consequences. The vampire world has rules, laws. I have broken several of them by involving myself in your affairs. There will be those who object, who demand that I answer for my actions. What kind of consequences? I may be summoned before the council. I may be required to leave England entirely. And if I am forced to leave, I cannot take you with me. Not yet. Not until you have lived your life, made your choices, decided freely whether this is truly what you want." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "I will not trap you, Imogen. I will not bind you to me through circumstance or necessity. If we are to be together, it must be because you choose it, every day, for the rest of your mortal life. And if the council forces you to leave, then I will leave, and I will return when they permit it, and I will hope that when I return, you will still want me." The words struck her like a blow. "You would leave me? After everything?" "I would leave you free." His voice was fierce. "That is the gift I can give you, Imogen. Freedom. The freedom to live your life without the shadow of my nature hanging over you. The freedom to marry a mortal man, to have children, to grow old in the sunlight. And if at the end of your life you still want me, I will be there. I will always be there." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "That is not a gift. That is a punishment. It is the only way I know to love you without destroying you." She pulled away from him, anger and grief warring in her chest. "You do not get to make that choice for me. You do not get to decide what I can endure, what I am willing to sacrifice. I am not a child, Lucian. I am a woman who has survived 2 years of poverty and humiliation. I am strong enough to survive your absence if I must. But do not tell me it is for my own good. Do not tell me you are protecting me by leaving. Then what would you have me do?" His voice was raw, desperate. "Tell me, Imogen, what would you have me do?" "Fight for me." She stepped back toward him, her hands fisting in his coat. "Fight for the right to stay. Fight the council. Fight their laws. Fight for us. And if I lose? Then you lose. But at least you will have tried. At least you will have shown me that I am worth fighting for." He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then slowly, he nodded. "Very well. I will fight. I will go before the council and argue my case. I will tell them that I acted to right a wrong, that I used my power to protect rather than to harm. And I will tell them that I have found something worth more than immortality, worth more than safety, worth more than their laws." "What is that?" "You." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes blazing with emotion. "I have found you, Imogen Hartfield, and I will not give you up without a fight." The summons came a week later, delivered by a pale woman with silver hair who appeared at the cottage door at midnight. She did not introduce herself, simply handed Lucian a sealed letter and departed without a word. Lucian read the letter in silence, his expression growing darker with each line. When he finished, he folded it carefully and set it aside. "I must leave tomorrow night. The council convenes in 3 days. I will be required to present my case and accept their judgment. What will they do to you? I do not know. Exile, most likely, possibly imprisonment. They take a dim view of vampires who interfere in mortal affairs, especially when that interference involves using our abilities to coerce or threaten." He looked at her, his eyes shadowed. "I do not regret what I did, Imogen, but I cannot promise you that the council will see it as I do." "Then I will come with you. I will testify on your behalf." "No." The word was sharp, absolute. "You will stay here. You will reclaim your home, rebuild your life. You will not risk yourself for me. You risked yourself for me. That was different. I am immortal. I can survive their punishment. You cannot." He crossed to where she stood and took her hands. "Promise me, Imogen. Promise me you will stay here, that you will not try to follow me." She wanted to refuse. She wanted to fight him, to insist that she had the right to stand beside him. But she saw the fear in his eyes, the genuine terror that she might be harmed, and she could not bring herself to defy him. "I promise," she whispered, "but you must promise me something in return." "Anything. Promise me you will come back. No matter how long it takes, no matter what they do to you, promise me you will find a way to come back." "I promise." He pulled her close, holding her as though he could memorize the feel of her in his arms. "I will come back, Imogen. Even if it takes decades, even if it takes centuries, I will come back to you." He left the next night, disappearing into the darkness without looking back. Imogen stood in the doorway of the cottage and watched him go, her heart breaking with every step he took away from her. The months that followed were strange and lonely. She moved back into the manor house, reclaiming the rooms that had once been hers, hiring new servants, restoring the gardens her mother had loved. The village welcomed her return with cautious warmth, though there were whispers about how she had managed to reclaim her property, about the mysterious gentleman who had visited Jonathan Crow in the night. She ignored the whispers. She had learned to ignore far worse. She waited. Days became weeks, weeks became months. She received no word from Lucian, no message or sign that he was alive. She began to fear that the council had destroyed him, that his promise had been a lie meant to comfort her. But she did not stop waiting. 3 years passed. The manor prospered under her management. She hired a competent steward, invested wisely, rebuilt the fortune her father had lost. She received offers of marriage from local gentlemen, but she refused them all. She could not imagine binding herself to anyone else, not when her heart belonged to a man who might never return. On the anniversary of the night Lucian had left, she stood in the garden at midnight, staring up at the stars and wondering if he could see them, wherever he was. "You kept your promise," a voice said behind her. "You stayed." She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Lucian stood at the edge of the garden, dressed in the same black clothing he had worn the night he left. He looked exactly as she remembered, unchanged and unchanging, and the sight of him made her knees weak. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would." He moved toward her slowly, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "The council exiled me for 5 years. I was forbidden to return to England, forbidden to contact you. I have spent every day of those years counting the hours until I could see you again. 5 years." She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "It has only been 3. The council reconvened. They reviewed my case and decided that I had served sufficient penance. They granted me permission to return early, on the condition that I never again interfere in mortal affairs without their explicit approval." He stopped a few feet away from her, his eyes searching her face. "You are older. You have changed." "I am 28 now. I have gray hairs and lines around my eyes. I am not the girl you left behind." "No, you are more beautiful than I remembered." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. "And you are still waiting for me. After 3 years, you are still here." "Where else would I be?" She caught his hand, pressing it against her face. "You promised you would come back. I promised I would wait. We both kept our promises." "I cannot stay, Imogen, not permanently. The council has granted me permission to visit, but I am still bound by their restrictions. I can come to you, but only for brief periods. I cannot live here, cannot remain in one place for too long. They fear I will draw attention, that mortals will discover what I am. Then we will have what time we can." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I do not need forever, Lucian. I only need you. However you can be here, whenever you can be here, that is enough." "It is not enough. You deserve more." "I deserve to choose." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "And I choose this. I choose you. I choose stolen moments and midnight meetings and a love that exists in the spaces between your visits. I choose all of it, because the alternative is a life without you, and that is no life at all." He closed his eyes, his expression anguished. You will grow old, you will die, and I will be left alone again. Then love me while you can. Love me while I am here, while I am alive, while I am yours. And when I am gone, remember me. Carry me with you through the centuries. Let me be the one mortal who mattered, the one mortal you could not forget. You already are. He opened his eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. You already are, Imogen. He kissed her then, and it was different from the first time. It was not gentle or tentative. It was fierce and desperate, and full of all the longing they had both carried through the years of separation. She kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring 3 years of waiting and hoping and grieving into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I will come to you as often as I can, he whispered. Every month, if the council permits. Every week, if I can manage it without drawing their attention. I will not let you face your life alone, Imogen, I swear it. And I will be here. She smiled through her tears. I will always be here, waiting for you. They stood together in the garden as the night deepened around them, holding each other as though they could stop time through sheer force of will. They both knew it was impossible. They both knew that her mortal years would pass quickly, that the time they had together was finite and precious. But for now, in this moment, they had each other, and that was enough.